Hello, my name is Zach Driscoll, and this is my Milestone 2 on my top-down shooter presentation. To start, you can see I have the scene up and running. Um, Up here in the top left, you have the player health UI, and then I also have some UI for the target dummy here, so you can see when it's taking damage. As for new things since last time, I now have a variety of weapons. Currently, I have, as you can see here, a sniper rifle. Here is a burst rifle, and down here is a little Uzi. Here, go ahead and start with that. So I can go ahead and pick it up. Well, just picked up burst rifle. So here, go ahead and shoot over here. As you can see, each bullet is still taking health from the dummy. Next we have the sniper rifle. This one uses a raycast, so it doesn't actually create a bullet projectile. It creates this invisible line that basically just detects when it hits something, and to show the player that it's actually hitting something, it will go ahead and spawn a particle effect on the object it hits, as well as at the end of the weapon barrel, like a muzzle flash. So as you can see here, got that cool little spark when I hit objects, and then if I hit the dummy, it'll still take damage. Let's see, and then let me go back down here and actually show the Uzi. There we go. So with this one, it goes ahead and just fires a stream of bullets when you hold down the mouse button. Which I thought was pretty cool. And then over here, you can see my extra feature that I added. I went ahead and put in a little fire particle effect. And it's just here in this trash can object. So it's just fun little burning barrel for no real good reason. Currently, I don't have any enemies, so the only way to show the player can still take damage is I went ahead and hooked it up to where when you press the space bar, they'll take a set amount of damage. And you can see it'll update the player health's UI as that happens. Alright, and then if we look a little bit closer at the player here, you can see that its hands are adjusted appropriately using inverse kinematics to go ahead and move each of the arms to the set positions. These little orange diamonds you see here are the two different hand points I have set for the Uzi in particular. So you got the right hand over here close to the trigger, and then the left hand here grabbing the handle / magazine. And then if we go ahead and, let's say, pick up the sniper rifle again, and then look closely here, you can see it still has two hand points, but they are different positions because it detects the 2 points on the weapon itself and then moves the hands and everything else accordingly to try and meet those positions as much as possible. Okay, now I will go ahead and show off my scripts. To start, we have the pawn script. So here I've got some references to the weapon script as well as the health script I've made. We have a weapon mount point where so that way when the player goes to pick up a weapon, the game knows exactly where to have that weapon essentially attached to the player. Let's see. So then down here I have my equip and unequip weapon functions. For the unequip, it basically just looks for the current weapon object that the player has, destroys it, sets the weapon to null. So that way it knows that it can pick up a new weapon. And then here, I go ahead and check to see if the player already has a weapon. If so, they can go ahead and call unequip weapon. Otherwise, go ahead and attach the new weapon to the player at the desired mount point. Next, I'll go ahead and show off the weapon script. So this is just the weapon class. You don't actually put any of this on any of the weapon objects itself, as you would go ahead and make separate scripts for them and have them inherit from this class, which I will get to more once I show off the other weapon scripts. Basically, this just provides some generic Unity events and functionality that any weapon should have. For instance, effects for shooting, pulling the trigger, releasing the trigger. If I wanted to add alternate attacks and reloads, I can. I haven't done that yet, but I'm looking forward to trying to implement some of these mechanics. As well as, like, say, checking for auto-firing, which is what the Uzi uses. And then here we have variable references to just some different stats that each weapon can have, like the right and left hand points for setting up the inverse kinematics, which I showed earlier, as well as how much damage each gun can deal, and the time that they can take to shoot. Ultimately, this is pretty simple. It basically just sets up all these Unity events that I showed up at the top and just tells it to invoke itself or set whatever Boolean it needs to true. Next, I'll go ahead and show off the burst rifle script. So this one, as you can see, inherits from weapon. So it takes everything that was in the weapon class and acknowledges that, okay, this can use everything in there, as well as override some things and do its own, still make it unique from if I had just put that on a weapon object. So for this one, since I wanted to make it a burst rifle, I needed to add extra fire points instead of just one to spawn the 2 extra bullets, so it's not just shooting one at a time. Otherwise, it has references to the projectile, as well as the projectile's speed and how long it will last before it destroys itself. Because if you say shoot and don't hit a target, we need to make sure that the game knows to eventually delete that bullet object, so that way it's not just floating out in space wasting memory when it's not needed anymore. So here I have my burst shoot function. Looks a little messy, but ultimately it's just checking for each of the 3 fire points and making sure that it's, spawns a bullet at each of those points. Next we have the Uzi, also inheriting from the weapon class. This one, since it's not a burst rifle, doesn't need the 3 fire points, so it only has 1, but it still also checks for the projectile, prefab, move speed, and lifespan. And then down here, effectively, it's the same kind of code as the burst rifle, just for 1 projectile. However, you can you can hold down the mouse button to shoot with this one, whereas the burst rifle, you need to do individual clicks to shoot a set of bullets. Here on the sniper rifle, as I mentioned before, this one is using a raycast shoot. It does still need a fire point, so that way it knows where to spawn that like star particle effect that you saw. And then it needs to keep track of the prefabs to know what specific particle it's spawning. If I wanted, I could have well, so in this instance, I used the same particle material for both the muzzle flash and the particle that spawned on the hit object, but this is set up to where I could use two different particle effects if I wanted to. I just thought that I liked having it the same for this instance. And so here, as I mentioned before, it goes ahead and uses a raycast to determine where it's going to go ahead and spawn that second particle, and then it makes sure to still deal damage to whatever object it hits, while also spawning in its own muzzle flash prefab on the fire point. So here's the inverse kinematic controller. Overall, pretty simple. Goes ahead and connects to the player's pawn and its animator to make sure that it can animate the hands properly to move where they need to move, while checking for the object's weight, so to speak, and its position. Next we have the pickup script. This is another class script similar to weapon, in that I can make a variety of different pickups and just have them inherit from this class, because this has the basic needs for all pickups. Really, it's pretty simple. It just knows that it needs to spawn pickups and what it does after it's spawned. In this instance, it just checks to make sure that a pawn is walking over it, in this case the player, and if it does, go ahead and pick up the pickup and destroy it, so that way it can spawn another one afterwards. So right now I only have one other pickup script because all my pickups are currently just weapons, but I do obviously have 3 of them, as you saw. So this one inherits from pickup, keeps track of the weapon that it needs to pick up, and then just in case, it also checks if the pickup is a weapon, and that it also checks if the player can equip the weapon and make sure that they can. And here's the spawner script for spawning these pickups, because as you could see, after I picked one up, it was gone, but then eventually respawned, so that way I could pick it up again later if I wanted to. Honestly, it's pretty generic. It has a timer, so that way it's not like just constantly spawning them infinitely. But then based on that timer, yeah, it just spawns the desired pickup after the set amount of time and then resets the timer.